7, so I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Staff, do you mind doing roll call?
Sure. Member Cho?
Here.
Member Lindsay?
Here.
Member Rios?
Here.
Member Trenkel?
Here.
Chair Ajwang?
Present. Okay. And so would anybody like to read out the land acknowledgement before we move forward, or? I can also read it.
I'll do it if you like. We can
Okay.
take turns, but I'll do it tonight.
Okay, awesome.
So the land acknowledgement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lejeune. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to these indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home.
Thank you so much, Member Lindsay. So moving on to agenda item 2, approval of minutes. So do we have minutes to approve for this meeting?
You do have to have a motion to approve in a second, and then we'll take the roll call vote.
Got it. Any motions?
Motion to adopt minutes.
Second? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Awesome. Okay. Minutes have been adopted.
We'll take the roll call vote to
Oh, the
adopt it.
vote. Okay, so here we go.
So just as a point of information, if anybody saw a mistake in the minutes, this might be when you would point it out and we would amend them. Otherwise, it's pretty pro forma, you know?
Got it. Okay. So will staff like to conduct the roll call?
Member Cho?
Here.
Oh, no.
Oh, sorry.
It's a vote, so
Oh,
yay or nay, yes or no.
okay.
We're
wait.
approving the minutes.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Member Lindsay?
Yes?
Member Rios?
Yes.
Member Trenkel?
Yes.
And Chair Ajwang?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay. Moving into public comment. Do we have any public comment at this time?
We do. Jeremiah?
Good evening, everybody. Welcome, commissioners. I served on this commission when it was Social and Economic Justice Commission. I was a school board's appointee for 2 years. We did a lot of work, myself and KZ. We did a lot of work, and others did a lot of work to get this land acknowledgement statement as part of the city. And I know we do fly a flag. I was at the ceremony. I made a quote in the San Francisco Chronicle newspaper that day. And I know the city did give the Ohlones, I think, $25,000 or $30,000 or something. Enough money to possibly buy a used car. So I'm just wondering, just want to, what does the land acknowledgement state mean to you guys as commissioners? I know Mr. Lindsay read it very quickly, kind of hard to understand. It was read so fast, and I'm just kind of getting this feeling that in a lot of committee meetings, commission meetings, even city council, it's now just a formality. It's now just something that's read, and it's kind of like, oh, who has to do it, instead of who gets to do it, And so I really take it seriously. I don't see the land acknowledgement statement displayed anywhere in the city visually. I don't see it displayed in the council chambers on a plaque anywhere. I don't see it displayed in public anywhere. I really think it should be something that should be displayed to where people could see it. somewhere in the city hall, right there in the city chambers, there should be a plaque on the wall. In the city hall, in the lobby, there should be a plaque on the walls stating the land acknowledgement statement. It's just something that's so hidden, and it's just something that it gets read very quickly at the beginning of a meeting. And then the meeting moves on and it's kind of like forgotten. So I'm hoping this commission, with your 12 to 14 meetings left, you know, there's breaks in August, usually don't meet in January after the new year. Sometimes quorum doesn't reach for the holidays in November, December. So you got about 12 to 14 meetings left. It would just be nice to see something focused on the continued commitment that that the city is supposed to be upholding. I don't think $30,000 is enough to call it done. I just really think that the land acknowledgement statement should be displayed on a plaque somewhere within Albany for everybody to see. Thank you.
There's no more public comment.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody who participated in public comment. And we would probably look to talk about that in our work plan as it relates to the land acknowledgement and creating a plaque for the land acknowledgement. So moving on to announcements. Are there any staff and commission member announcements?
We do have not a new member, but a member attending for, they weren't here for the last one, so maybe if you guys want to go through, introduce yourselves one at a time.
Sure. Hi, my name is Erin, and I'm currently a rising junior, and then I go to Albany High School. I'm really glad to be here.
Hi, Jim Lindsay. Been active in Albany for a long time and on lots of commissions and stuff like that. And I'm a retired teacher. I taught at El Cerrito High School for a long time.
I'm Akinya Zhuang. I'm a member of the Albany community. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Flor Rios. My name is Flor Rios, and I am a member of Berkeley and also of Albany communities, and I do research at Berkeley.
I'm Charlie Trenkle, and I'm a rising 10th grader at Albany High School.
Okay, thank you everybody for introducing yourselves and welcome. Are there any more announcements?
Oh, no, that was it.
Okay, awesome. And so,
I have a brief announcement, which is that, and maybe staff could help out here, I don't know. But I think the racial equity survey that we sent council a couple of years ago came up maybe at a recent meeting.
I think recently they were beginning the process of considering or choosing the survey.
Yeah, the company to do it.
Yeah.
Justice Collective, I think, is what they're recommending. Do you know if that was decided upon?
I'm not sure. I could look into that and
Okay.
get back to you. Yeah.
I could have too, but it occurred to me. Jeff, do you know the answer?
I'm sorry, I don't. I know people are working on it, and
Okay.
I haven't personally been, so if
Right.
it hasn't already, it will be soon, I think.
Okay. Thank you.
thank you, Member Lindsay. So now we will move on to presentations. So we are hearing a presentation by the Community Development Director on the 2023 to the 2031 City of Albany Housing Development.
Right. So bear with us a second. I need to be brought up as a
I think she.
panelist. Let's see. Are you logged in on Zoom here?
Yeah.
Oh, let's see here. Hang on one second. Let me just get someone in the AV area to bring me up. Excuse me for a second.
No worries.
people behind the scenes are working on that. I have a PowerPoint presentation I want to give you. And there we go. Okay. So, still not seeing the opportunity to share my screen. Yeah. I'm going to send this to you real quick. Yeah. Let's do it that way. So bear with us. I apologize. Usually we have this sorted out, but not this evening. While this is, well, let me just try to do this. Here we go. This, I think, will work. Re-enter. Here we go. Okay. My apologies for that. So good evening. My name is Jeff Bond. I'm the Director of the Community Development Department. I'm here this evening to give you an update on the preparation of the city's housing element, which is a part of the city's general plan. I'd like to start by giving you a brief introduction to our department. Since for some of you, this is possibly the first time that I've had a chance to meet you and tell you a little bit about what we do and give you some context for the presentation that follows. So Community Development Department, we have a staff of about 10 people at the moment. We support on a regular basis 3 of the city's commissions, the Planning and Zoning Commission, which does land use planning work for the city's Transportation Commission, obviously roadways, bicycle, pedestrian facilities, so forth. The Climate Action Committee, focusing in on the reduction of greenhouse gases and adaptation to sea level rise. Then behind the scenes, a few other things, building permits, inspections, a lot of the work related to our creeks and waterfront. More into the realm of this evening's presentation, we're kind of being the project managers for the city on the development of affordable housing down on Cleveland Avenue, the SAHA project, as it's sometimes called. Other things we do, disaster preparedness and hazard mitigation planning, and last but not least, waste management related things. So we're very multidisciplinary. One thing that we're not, although we sometimes help out, we're not necessarily hands-on in social services in the sense of working with individual people that might be asking for some assistance or need some assistance. We occasionally find ourselves in those situations, but that's tends to be more of our neighborhood services colleagues in the Recreation and Neighborhood Services Department that we collaborate with them. So the housing element. The housing element is a very detailed plan. It's required by state law. We have to do one every 8 years, and it has to be approved by the state. And we're actually a couple of months late in completing ours, along with most cities in California, because the process of preparing these plans has become much more detailed, and it's good. It's good the type of detail that we have to focus in on. And the idea behind a housing element is that every city has to plan to do its fair share. And that in this particular cycle, we've been doing these for decades, but new to what we're doing in 2023 is really looking at social and racial justice issues in housing in a much more meaningful and systematic way than we have in the past. And the term that's sometimes used in this is called affirmatively furthering fair housing, which is kind of a little bit of a tongue twister. So sometimes the acronym that you'll hear is AFFH, affirmatively furthering fair housing. The big picture goals of this are on the screen. I won't read them word for word. I think they represent good progressive ideals that we all want for the community in terms of providing housing that's equitable and safe and clean and affordable. We have to recognize that some people need assistance and provide that assistance whenever we can. Item 4, reducing constraints that create barriers. Sometimes that is self-inflicted by government. We have lots of rules and regulations and processes that are discouraging to people that want to try to do the right thing. I mentioned the need to be conscious and assertive about addressing fair housing. And then providing affordable housing isn't cheap, so it's a question of getting the financial resources to deliver. There are 6 chapters to the housing element. These chapters are essentially mandated by state law. The order and the format and the names and all that are set by state law, for better or worse. And then there are some appendices that are helpful and important as well. There are a couple of these, I'll just kind of summarize briefly what these chapters do. I won't go into details of any of these in particular, but I'd be happy to answer your questions when the time comes. Obviously, the introduction is the introduction. Second chapter is to look back at our previous 8 years since the last time we did this. How are we doing? And make sure that we haven't forgotten the things that we haven't gotten to carry forward. Chapter 3 is the needs assessment, and this is kind of a statistical heavy chapter that really does a deep dive into things such as census data in Albany. And it's useful for the housing element and perhaps for many other things that you'll be doing as a commission over the next few years as your work goes, but you might want to come back to this chapter as a resource for the number of people that meet different classifications or categories. It's in one place, I think, one of the more detailed locations that you can find this kind of information in Albany. Chapter 4 is about where do we build more housing, and and I'll show you a graph in a moment, we have to plan for over 1,100 units of housing in Albany. And for a city that has somewhere over 7,000 units, adding another 1,000 is, in a city that's built out like Albany, is a challenge. So this chapter goes into those details about where we can do this that are realistic, that are have the potential to be affordable. Sometimes it's easy to build expensive housing because it's financially more feasible, but to look at locations where it's more likely that reasonably priced housing can be built. Chapter 5 are the constraints. I mentioned that kind of mostly sort of the bureaucratic internal issues that we have to work through to make sure we're not making it more difficult on ourselves to accomplish our goals. And then finally, Chapter 6 is, and I think one of the most important parts of this is outlines a series of goals, policies, and programs that are that we're going to work on, that we're intending to work on over the next 8 years. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about those in a moment. And there's something like 50 policies, and I think somewhere in roughly the same number of programs. Of the appendices, the main one I wanted to mention again that may fall into the purview of your work, both housing related and other things, is the fair housing analysis. Again, lots and lots of statistical information on that in that appendix that really looks at the geographic distribution of households in Albany, and interesting analysis there. So I mentioned Chapter 4 talks about site analysis. This just gives you a little context for how the preparation of housing elements have changed. This graph shows the requirements of the past 3 housing elements, and then the requirements of the current housing element that we're working on. The first 3, we were required to plan for 300 and something units each time. Whether or not these get built, that's a different issue, but that was the goal line that was set for us by the state. You can see the goal line moved quite a bit in this current cycle, and we're now required to, like almost every other city in the Bay Area, required to plan for 3 or more than 3 times what we have in the past. And this particular number is 1,114 units. I mentioned that there's a series of policies and programs that have been outlined, 60 policies, 57 programs. The key areas are listed in these bullet points, and under each one of those, there's at least a half a dozen things that we're going to be working on. Each one of those has a target date for completion over the next 8 years. Most of that is for, it's good that it's front-loaded, except that it's a lot of work in the next couple of years. But we're going to try to dive into some of the details, and I'm going to enumerate the first projects right out of the box for you in a moment. But these are the areas that we're essentially committing to ourselves and to the state that we're going to work on, and that we expect to be held accountable to. And 8 years from now, if not sooner, we'll need to come back and see how we did, and what we accomplished and what we didn't accomplish. I want to talk a little bit about what you can expect over the next 6 to 12 months. And the first thing that we are planning to bring to the community for discussion is ways to improve housing security. In other words, tenant protections is kind of the term that we frequently hear. This is a list of areas of tenant protections that we want to evaluate and ask the City Council to prioritize for us what they would like us to work on over the next couple of years. And our goal is to work through each one of these. I can't say that everyone will get approved. I think every one of these in one way or the other is controversial and complicated and expensive to someone. So, but we are committing to have a thorough, open policy discussion over as I said, over the next 6 months to a year. We're hoping to start this fall and ask the City Council to give us some priorities, and then we'll run from there to work on one at a time or 2 at a time. I should mention that there was a question earlier about the survey that Commissioner Lindsay mentioned. I think we also are doing a little bit more targeted survey that will be rolling out pretty soon. In fact, probably later this week or early next week, which is really trying to survey tenants in particular and get some baseline information about them. One of the things that has happened in the preparation of this housing element is we've tried to make an effort to reach out to tenants, but we haven't really gotten the level of input that I think we all would like to have. And so this survey is not perfect, but we hope it gives a little bit of an insight that helps prioritize things, maybe get some people who haven't yet been engaged in the community, maybe they start to become interested in these issues and participate in a more significant way over time. So you might be seeing that come out in the near future. If you're a renter, we'd love to have you respond to that, or if you know others that are, please pass it on. It's going to start going out through our various e-notifies and city newsletters and that kind of thing, and we'll be open for a while. so that there's no great rush to get the word out. As if that first list wasn't enough, and it's a little overwhelming, frankly, as the manager of the department, we have other ideas that we know we need to work on over the coming year or two as well, and I'll mention these just briefly. Want to address opportunities, or try to address opportunities for affordable housing for seniors. We have an existing rent review program. We want to have a review of that, an evaluation of that. How is that functioning? But not a lot of people have used it, so is that good or bad? Is it because the outreach isn't, or people don't know about it, or is it because there haven't been issues? Depends who you talk to. We have some things in our municipal code that we would like to update. For example, we have a code that requires if a market rate developer builds housing, a certain percentage, 15% of that housing has to be affordable, and we regulate that 15%. We'd like to update that ordinance to make sure that it's kind of contemporary. It's now about 15, 20 years old. We have pretty good, but not completely up-to-date requirements for things like shelters and navigation centers and SROs, single room occupancies. So we'd like to take an opportunity to update our codes on that. We haven't received any proposals for those kinds of facilities in Albany, but if we do, we want to make sure our codes are welcoming to that potential. Another thing that's talked about in a lot of communities these days are programs to provide tenants or community organizations an opportunity to purchase rental housing. If a property owner wishes to sell, say, their apartment building, to give tenants an opportunity to organize themselves and purchase it, or give a nonprofit organization an opportunity to purchase it. Again, very controversial program. It really hasn't been used a great deal in the East, at least in the East Bay. I think there's a program in San Francisco, but I'm researching the details of that now. So that'll be something that we want to look into. And the last two bullet points here, first is to do some research and improve the awareness of the history of housing discrimination in the East Bay, including Albany. It's out there. People are still sometimes surprised to hear it, and we think that needs to be a little bit more front and center as we're talking about these programs and policies in the future, is to acknowledge where we're coming from. And lastly, as I mentioned, kind of continuing to do as best as we can with outreach to make sure we're hearing all the voices, and that everybody who wants to participate in the discussion has an opportunity to do that in a way that, in whatever form that they're most comfortable with. So I'm going to pause there. I realize that's quite a bit of information, although it just barely scratches the surface of these, 300-page documents or something. I'm going to pause and be happy to answer any of your questions and hear your feedback.
Just all of this is in our agenda packet. So, and if you're having trouble accessing stuff, which can take a little getting used to, you can get some help from John or somebody. But just to let you know, this slideshow and the entire housing element is all in our agenda packet.
Yeah, I will post this. I just finished this slideshow about 15 minutes ago, so I'll post it after the meeting.
I thought it was in there.
There was a memo.
Oh, okay.
But this isn't in there.
Okay.
This was kind of last minute. I'm sorry, it's a long day. But I will post this, so that will be available to you and everyone, members of the public.
Are there any questions?
I have a question. In regards to affordable housing, you mentioned that there is an ordinance for housing, inclusionary housing ordinance, which market rate is at 15%. And you mentioned that that was a little antiquated. What would be a contemporary evaluation?
To clarify, the 15% is the number of units. So if, let's say you're building a 100-unit apartment building, 15 of those units would have to be affordable. Of those 15, half of them would be affordable to very low-income households, which depends on the number of people in the household, but it's usually someplace around people making $40,000 or so. Say two people making maybe $40,000 a year. I think that's roughly the dollar amount these days. And then the other half is, the other half of 15% is affordable to low-income households, which is, I think, again, for two people, I think it's around $60,000. I could pull up those exact numbers if you're interested, if you give me a moment.
But you said it needs to be updated, so how would it be updated?
So, right. The update would be, is 15% the right percentage? And then are there situations where it would be better to have the developer of a project, instead of including affordable housing in their project, would it be better to just charge them an equivalent fee and use that money to do something else in the affordable housing realm? And, you know, for example, if we had a different kind of project that we were trying to scramble and pull money together for, if we get a developer to put money in, maybe that is the kind of the financial boost that an unrelated project needs to come to fruition. So that's one thing. Another thing that needs to, you know, are we addressing the right income levels? I mentioned the very low income or the low income households. Do we want to change that to go up or down? And right now, for the challenge that a lot of cities are having is these inclusionary housing requirements are almost too tight. And so people aren't building any housing. They look at that and they say, oh, if you're going to make me do this, I'm going to go someplace else. And so that too is a part of the discussion of whether we actually lower them to get more housing built, albeit at market rate. And that's a policy judgment for our city council ultimately.
And cities can do that and still be in compliance with the state rules on housing now?
Yes, because the state just wants us to have these requirements. They're not setting the actual number. So we could lower them. We'd see more market rate housing, or we raise them and we see no housing. That's the tension.
Yeah, I get it. I can just imagine an area that's hostile to low-income folk. This sure lets them get to do whatever the hell they want. I'm not saying we are, but I'm a little surprised the state's allowing certain rich cities that have been very resistant to anything, that have been in the newspapers, you know, oh yeah, we'll do, you know, 1/10 of 1% or something is going to be affordable, and the state goes, okay, you know, okay, all right.
They have to, yes, that, I mean, theoretically that's possible. I would hope no one is quite that low, but there are certainly cities that have, say, a 10% inclusionary housing requirement. You know, we're at 15%. I don't think it's been hugely successful. Our ordinance has been on the books for, like I say, 15, 20 years. I think we've created 5 inclusionary units. So it's not, I don't put that up as a success. So maybe we adjust the numbers a little bit, we'll get more.
I do have a question. So you had talked about the site analysis, and I wanted to get a better sense of, you know, what Albany is doing as it relates to, because you had also referenced creating affordable housing in all neighborhoods. And so within the site analysis, how does that shake out? Because we live in Albany, it's predominantly single family homes, and I think that the history of that is that, you know, affordable housing isn't generally built in like those neighborhoods. So like how is that being tackled?
You've asked a great question. It's a challenge. A couple of things. Again, there's trade-offs here. the to make it the most cost-effective housing to build is higher density, kind of medium density apartment buildings, like what you see kind of going up and down San Pablo Avenue. In other cities, we have one project on the books that hasn't started construction yet that would happen at the bowling alley, old bowling alley site, and sometime hopefully soon. So definitely San Pablo Avenue is a good location for that kind of housing. We would like to look at updating our zoning regulations to do similar types of housing on Solano Avenue. So it starts to get both, not just that San Pablo corridor, but the east-west Solano Avenue corridor. The other thing that is happening in our single-family neighborhoods are accessory dwelling units, which are kind of naturally affordable. And it's actually been, I think, one area of terrific success. I think we've gotten over 100 units of accessory dwelling units built in the last 4 or 5 years. And those are scattered all over the city in single-family neighborhoods. They are, for the most part, although they're not regulated by us, they tend to be reasonably priced.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question to the ADU point. So as it relates to ADUs, do we have any information about how those are generally used? Because, I mean, I've seen tons of ADUs going up. But then my thought is that do we have any statistics on this actually being an impact as it relates to creating affordable housing?
One of the things that we want to do is to do an Albany-specific survey, but there have been surveys in the Bay Area and in the East Bay. And, if you were to give me a moment or two, I could dig it up. But it is, for the most part, they're moderately priced. They're occupied often by family, extended family. So a parent or an adult child of a household will often live there. Not always. Some people build them for their home office or their hobbies or whatever, but most of them are occupied by people who would otherwise not be able, they'd have to pay more to live someplace else, have their own apartment usually. So it's really good for, what we're seeing is a lot of people kind of mixed generation housing. The rents tend to be, again, if you're renting to a family member, it's either free or pretty low rent. If it's market rate, they're still pretty affordable because they tend to be pretty small. They're genuinely, most of them are genuinely studio apartments. I was in one yesterday or Monday that was about 300 square feet, really, and that one was going to be for a grandparent or a parent, I guess, of the family that lived there.
Yeah. Sorry. Again, follow-up question.
Yeah,
so,
please.
If we're thinking about like this from the perspective of mixed generation housing, and kind of those kinds of uses or like hobbies and things like that, living in Albany and understanding the privilege that comes with living in Albany, I think that, do we have anything that is kind of sort of accounting for that, the fact that the people who generally live here are generally well-resourced, so on and so forth. And so how is that actually coming back to support the purpose of affordable housing? Or kind of like, especially as it relates to the, equitable access or, anything that would kind of come back to DEIJ goal or something like that?
At the moment, I don't think we do, to be honest with you. I think we should. I'd like to explore that. I personally think that would be a really interesting area to try to figure out what would be an effective way to become a more inclusive community, to make sure that people who want to live in Albany know that they can and that there are opportunities for them, and show them what the opportunities are. I don't think that happens right now. And that's a shame, and it's been, a century of discrimination that we have to turn the ship around on.
Member Lindsay?
I mean, it is a huge, nasty, it's a problem for, the younger generation is like, how am I ever going to buy a house? And then when you add, the history of race into that on top, it's really, really tough for people of color that are also young. Besides just being young, it's tough. I do feel like part of the thing, it's not a complete solution, but if we just build more affordable housing, and we're just more housing in general, even if it's moderate, just supply, when supply goes up, right, that helps a little bit with pricing. And if some of it can be purchasable, converted to condos or something like that, that's a way that, as a financial coach, when I'm counseling young folk, a lot of times the first thing that you can get is a kind of starter home, or maybe you'll just like it and stay there as a condo, right? And so as opposed to buying like a standalone house. So it is a tricky, really difficult problem. I don't disagree with anything Jeff said. But I do think that those are at least pieces of the puzzle, Yeah, I have like 4 questions too when you're done.
I can go ahead.
Okay. So number 1 is Albany Village at all part of this?
Sort of. The chapter 3 that I mentioned, the needs assessment and the reason that we're building more housing includes University Village. So part of the reason we got that assignment of 1,114 units was based on evaluation of Albany, its population, its resources. We're a high resource community, so we got a higher target because we do have a good school system. We have all sorts of things that make this a nice, livable community. So that increased our allocation that we're supposed to plan for. But as at least the way the state runs the program right now, the construction of student housing does not count towards that 1,100 units. So there's a little bit of a double standard there. The construction project across the street here is 289 units. That won't count towards our target. It certainly will count towards serving students who live in the community. So it's great that it's going up, and I hope it's affordable. I don't know what the rent's going to be, but I hope it's helpful to students. I think those particular apartments are for grad students.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really glad they're going up. It's a little bizarre, that it's being counted as our responsibility, but then when houses are built there, for those who don't know, the UC basically controls pretty much everything there that happens: policing, streets, housing, everything except fire service, pretty much. And by state law, we don't have any control over it, and we can't tell them to do anything, and they pretty much ignore us every time we ask them. Not a great relationship between Albany and UC, actually, because they're just really hard to deal with, or at least there hasn't historically been a great relationship. Maybe it's better now. So I was curious, anyway, about the village. The second thing is, the housing element itself is a little much for me. But the state's reply, where they said you guys need to fix some things, I found to be pretty much unintelligible. It was the most incredible gobbledygook. It looked to me like they just took some boilerplate stuff and threw it in and changed a couple of words and sent the same thing to everybody. That's just my guess. I don't know. And how are you going to make the changes that they're not even readable? I mean, I don't understand.
I know they're doing their best, but I have to agree with you that some of it just doesn't make a lot of sense. It is a cut and paste. We talk to them on a fairly regular basis, and we have tried to draft responses to that letter. We actually sent last week, I guess it was last week, we drafted some, and we sent it to the people at the state that are assigned to review our housing element and said, is this what you're looking for? And are waiting for them to get back to us. So the letters are very confusing. It's a little bit of a frustrating process. The time and money that we're spending in preparing this plan, I'd rather be actually doing the stuff that's in the plan. As much as I'm a planner, I like plans. I'd also like to do things. And I'm frustrated that we're not, I wanted this to be done 6 months ago, and we'd be already talking about all those things that I said that we're going to talk about later.
Okay. Maybe I can skip that question for the sake of time and clarity, but does the city want this commission to do anything on this? I did not ask the council member that appointed me, actually, but are they looking for us to do something, or is this mostly informational, or?
This is very much informational and introductory to you. If we were having this meeting 2 years ago, I think we would have set it up in a different format. We wouldn't have had all this already written and draft to send off to the state.
Yeah.
So we're trying to we think we're really close to the goal line, and we'd like to get over the goal line. So no, at this point, this is informational only. If the state says you're done, I hope that we're done, and then we do come back to you as these policies and programs are starting to be developed and get your input on those.
Okay. I'm done.
Any further questions?
I have one final question. My question refers to a comment you made about housing resources not being marketed well or distributed well among the community. What resources are there, and where can folks find them?
That's the problem. It's Craigslist.
You're telling me nobody knows?
The cities, as city staff people, we don't know anything about availability of apartments. No.
I wasn't speaking of availability of apartments. When you say housing resources, what are you referring to? Apartments?
For most people, apartments are the entryway into Albany, yes. Not for everyone, but I worry more about renters than I do people who have the financial capacity to consider purchasing a home.
So the only resources that the community development director is aware of would be apartments, availability of apartments on Craigslist?
Well, no, I'm not sure what you're driving at.
Do you mean like assistance?
No, I'm trying to understand when you mentioned that the delivery of housing resources is not being marketed well to the community. My question is, what are the housing resources that you are referencing? What resources are we talking about that you would like the community to know?
I would like to get to a place where, and I don't know how to do this yet, but I'd like to get to a place where people in other communities who want to move to Albany are made aware that they're welcome, that there are housing opportunities, and maybe it's some sort of form of marketing the availability of apartments and for that, I guess, for that matter, homes for sale in Albany. I know lots of households in the Bay Area would love, particularly households with children, would love to be able to live in Albany for the benefit of the school district, to appreciate the benefit of the school district and to know that they're welcome here. And I don't think that is happening in Albany. I don't think it's happening in a lot of places. So I'm not trying to pick on ourselves here in Albany necessarily, but I do think, you know, there are formal and informal ways to try to figure that out, and I don't know what the answer is, but I'd like to explore that.
Is there a commission that does that?
There's not a housing commission in Albany, and for that matter, there's not a housing staff person in Albany. That would,
Maybe that's one of the issues that we can bring up.
Yeah.
Because if there is no housing and our community development director is unaware of the housing resources, that's a pretty big gap for the city to have. Do you agree?
I think it's, I'm not sure what you're saying about me, but.
Nothing, Mr. Bond.
I agree that it would be great to have more resources focused on housing.
Yes.
And I think there are a lot of different things that person could be working on.
Could we assist you in that?
I think you will. I think we'll be coming to you to ask for that help.
Great, thank you, Mr. Bond.
Kind of just to piggyback off of that question, one of the things that I was thinking about is, do we have any initiatives that help people who are landlords understand different initiatives that they can take advantage of? For example, I rarely see listings in Albany that accept Section 8, for example. And, you know, I saw one the other day and I realized, like, oh, this is something that maybe perhaps if people were educated on this, then they would be more open to offering those kinds of initiatives that would really help pull in low-income folks, people from diverse backgrounds, and kind of, you know, help with creating a community that is much more mixed income, much more diverse, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And so is that something that's part of like the goals, policies, and programs you were talking about within the plan?
Yes. There are programs available to help educate property owners on how to comply with the law. For example, I think it's against the law to discriminate against Section 8 tenants. I'm pretty sure that's a violation of federal law. And there are certainly many aspects of state and federal fair housing laws that go beyond just Section 8. We do have resources available for landlords, but again, that's another area that we can probably do a lot better job in getting that information out.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Section 8 is potentially a great program, but it's so poorly funded that I think there's only a couple of dozen Section 8 vouchers that are in use in Albany right now, unfortunately, which is a shame.
Yeah, and I mean, to that point, something that I did kind of want to just bring up in general is that I have seen listings where people say, no Section 8, don't apply if you have a Section 8, essentially. And so that's something that I feel like, going back to my point within like having better educational forums and spaces for landowners and landlords, or property owners rather, so that they are well informed and know like what actually it means to, that's a violation of federal law to say something like that in a listing, and so on and so forth.
Yes, that if that's happening, I'd like to hear the details of that. That's the kind of thing that we would pretty assertively pursue with that particular property owner. And if there's a pattern of that going on in Albany, this is something we need to deal with sooner rather than later. I'm a little shocked that that's still happening, but I guess I shouldn't be. Yeah, okay.
So if somebody sees that, they should let you know?
Please do.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Bond, just to clarify, if there are allegations of discrimination in housing, those complaints would go to your office?
I would be happy to take them in. I'm probably not the person, I'm not an attorney. I may not be the best person to investigate it and take the proper actions, but I would make sure that it gets in the hands of the right person who could pursue that. We have partners in other government agencies that might be better equipped to deal with that, but I would definitely want to make sure it gets in the right hands.
Is there, when we mentioned tenant protections, is there somewhere where those items could be reported in the city?
Reported?
Reported, yes.
We would, as we adopt those programs, I think we would want to promote them in all sorts of different ways.
So there are no current programs that do that?
Right now, we don't have any, beyond the rent review program, we don't have any other tenant protections that go beyond what are in state law.
Those are all my questions. Thank you, Mr. Bond.
You're welcome.
I have one question about the tenant protections as well. Because you had mentioned that that's kind of something that is within the advisory board's discretion in terms of what actually gets done, do you have any quotas in terms of like, okay, we want to be able to at least do 2, right, or something like that? Do you have any aspirations for something like that, or is it just like if it doesn't get done, it kind of falls by the wayside?
We'll do whatever the city council asks us to do. So they would set that target for us.
Okay.
Realistically, I think politically, they can only do 1 or 2 things at a time, so we would kind of work through them as best we could, but it would be up to them to set that target for our work.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions?
We have public comment.
Oh, awesome.
Jeremiah? Jeremiah? I guess not.
Hello, I'm here.
Okay.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know what's going on with my service. So it sounds like Albany needs a welcoming center. You know, maybe it could be a pop-up welcoming center. It could be at a local real estate office, right? So, you know, people can come in and talk to a real estate agent, talk to somebody about housing. So first of all, it seems like Albany really needs a welcoming center, somewhere people can go. I know there's the community center, but there's kind of short-staffed, and I don't know, it's kind of a interesting vibe there, but we definitely need a welcoming center. I know we talked about that. So, and also, let's see what else. That 15%, I think is way too low, because for one reason, shouldn't all housing be affordable? So take a look at this example. The Albany's living wage right now is $20.13 per hour. And it's even lower than that, $17 an hour, if the restaurant or business doesn't provide insurance. So $17 an hour, $20 an hour. Basically, if you do the math, it's about, if you work an 8-hour job, 5 days a week, it's, what did my calculator say? $3,200 a month. So let's say the cheapest affordable unit in Albany is probably an ADU. I think we should put a cap on ADUs. Because if you make $3,000 a month, okay, well, 1/3 of that goes to taxes, so there goes $1,000. So now you have $2,000. You got to buy food, you got to pay PG&E, you got to pay water. It's $100 alone a month just to have water services for your house without even paying for water. So all in all, I think we should put a cap on the ADUs. And where could you live in Albany based on the Albany living wage? So to be socially equitable, that's what this commission's in the name. We got to do something about caps on ADUs, and definitely this is a topic for further discussion in another meeting.
That's it for public comment.
Thank you to everybody who participated in public comment. And we can now move on to discussion and possible action on matters related to the work plan, 6-1 work plan. In our last meeting, we had one item brought up that I did want to rehash, was the, from Member Rios, outlining and drafting an equity statement for the city of Albany. Did you want to add to that?
Well, to be clear, there is no equity statement that we drafted, so there would be no additions. We would be creating it.
Oh yeah, I mean, add to that comment that you made in the last meeting. Not that we have one, not that we have an equity statement already, but you had mentioned wanting to
Continue that work?
exactly.
Yes, I'd love to continue that work, absolutely.
Okay. Is there any? Also, we have the work plan items on this sheet that we have in front of us. So if members need to take a minute to read it before suggesting any work plan items, I'm happy to give some time.
Although this is staff's ideas for things that might be, that we could possibly do on our work plan?
And staff recommendations, yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay. I don't think I've seen this, but maybe it was somewhere. By the way, somebody asked me what did the SAGC do and what was incomplete, and you can maybe help me. We're not the SEJC. We have a much more focused. It's not just the SEJC renamed. We aren't, but there's a lot of overlap there. From memory, kind of. So, Flora, I'm hoping you can help out a little bit here. Sure. I probably missed something. We initiated the Lijon-Ohlone tribe relationship with the city. We got the racial equity survey through to the council, and the council approved it and is moving on it, albeit very slowly, but is moving on it. We got an aging in place plan to council that had actually been worked on by the previous SEJC, but we were able to finish it and get it to council. And then there was a recommendation on terminology that happened that I think you were part of.
Yes.
That also got to council. And then there was some stuff we were working on that we didn't complete it. And what complete means is you reach an agreement, you write it up, you bring it back to the commission, and if the commission approves it, it's sent to the council, and then the council hopefully takes action on it. So that's kind of like when we complete an item, it's because we said, okay, here's our recommendation to council. That's completing an item, because we're an advisory body, so we advise. Right? We advise council, mostly, sometimes staff if they ask us. So we were working on a racial equity statement. We were also working on a proposal to hire a racial equity officer in Albany that we weren't able to complete in time. And those are the two things that I remember. There were a whole bunch of other committees, subcommittees formed to work on various things, but didn't really get too far. And a lot of those things are not directly related to RISE, but were SEJC type things as opposed to RISE type things. But Flora, can you think of anything else that I've missed here?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think after the presentation of Mr. Bond, I'd really like to put a motion to set a housing equity subcommittee so that we can assist you in finding the resources to market to Albany citizens and residents.
Process-wise,
So I want to recall that I just placed a motion and I'm requesting a
Oh.
second.
that was a motion?
So there's currently no work plan you could put it in the work plan. I mean, there's a recommended work plan item relating to the housing element. And once the work plan is implemented, you could make a motion to form a subcommittee to that end.
So I would like to add the housing and just prioritize that in our work plan.
That's noted. I've included it on the list.
Perfect.
Would you, Member Lindsay, for the two possible work plan items that you've mentioned being carried over from the SEJC, would you like those to be included on this current work plan, or at least discussed to be included on this current?
Yes. The racial equity statement, we've already made some progress. We need to get it done. And the proposal to hire an equity officer in Albany would be a real game changer. I would like us to pursue that also. All of these come from those two things, come from the racial equity impact plan that council has already approved. And there are 9 items on it. So may I read them?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Adopt an equity statement, so that's one that we're proposing we pursue aggressively. Complete a minimum of 2 additional listening sessions, that's number 2. Number 3 is complete racial equity community survey, that's already in process. Number 4 is revise the city's mission and vision statements to reflect racial equity. That's number 4. Number 5 is launch of an Office of Racial Equity and Human Rights Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So that's the one that proposing a racial equity officer. That would be the director of that office. Number 6 says provide yearly updates to community on progress towards equity goals. Number 7, outreach communication, improve outreach and communication using multiple modes, digital access, have a racial equity webpage, and whatever else we need to do to provide outreach and information to people. Number 8 is partnerships, in particular with the Albany Unified School District, to have aligned racial equity goals between the city and the school district. And number 9 is review of police department policies and procedures, but that's happening via its own special commission if it still exists.
Yes, there's the policing commission now.
It does still exist.
Yeah,
Is that permanent now?
It just started, yeah.
Oh, okay. There was a temporary one. I didn't know they'd made it permanent, so that's good. So 2 of these 9 are approved by the city and their staff is on them and they're happening at one level or another. And in another 2 of them, I'm proposing should be 2 of our work plan items.
Got it. And that would be the equity statement and then the proposal of racial equity officer.
Racial equity officer, you could say Office of Racial Equity, but it's the same idea. However we want to say it's the same idea. And process-wise, I think if we could agree on, say, 5 items, right, as a starting work plan, if you take too many things, it becomes overwhelming and sometimes people get nothing done. So it's better to have a smaller number of things and get them done. And when you get something done, then we can take another item, right? And so I think just saying the number 5, we could decide what's a good number, but I think it's not too big. And then do we have to have those actually written up in some proper format to get to council?
You do, if at this meeting you don't necessarily draft it exactly how you want it, you can make a motion to designate the chair to work with staff to draft it up and take that to council.
Okay, so that's a process I'd propose. we agree on the 5 things, 5 maybe, I don't know if 5 is the right number, but let's just say 5 things. And then it has to be put in the proper format, so we would pass a motion saying that we authorize you, working with staff, to get it in the final form, so it can get to council before our next meeting. Otherwise, we have to wait until September just to turn in the paper. So then council would, hopefully, I think they would probably have just approved the work plan if it's in line with, city stuff. And then we could start actually getting to work, form subcommittees, and maybe pick an item to work on together, as a group, and start making some progress. But yeah, if we could agree on some number of items, I don't know, people should chime in on how many items is good, right? And prioritize those, then that would be fabulous. That would let us move forward.
Would some of our younger members like to make any comments?
Thank you.
What matters to you?
That's a good question. Well, I can't think of anything for now, but if something comes up, I'll bring it up, I guess.
Thank you, Member Cho. Member Trinkle?
I think we should have like 5 to 10 work plan items, because didn't like SEJC have like 15 and they didn't finish? So I feel like 5 to 10 would be a better way to go. Also, are these already on, or just recommendations that we can add?
Those are just recommendations as of now. As a commission, we can look at those and add those to our work plan, but that's not, it's not a given that those would be on our work plan. Am I saying this correctly?
That's right. Just with one caveat, the SSB is a required item per the formation of this group.
He's referring to the sugar sweetened beverage tax revenue.
That's right.
Where we advise council on how we think the money should be spent. And that's part of a council ordinance that we have to give advice. So that's not really a choice. The first 3 here are, none of these are, one says participate, one says help out with the housing element. I think we definitely want that as one of our items. And one says conduct facilitated forums as part of regular commission meetings. We don't really need a work item to do that. That just means inviting somebody to give a presentation and having some discussion about something. And we could put that as a work plan item, but you don't actually have to have it on your work plan to do it. Unless I'm missing something.
Member Trinkle, did you have anything further to say in terms of work plan recommendations?
Right now we have, so how many do we have, like, ideas do we have?
So as of right now, we have the SSB that is required, the last bullet point there. And then we have outlining and drafting an equity statement for Albany, the proposal for a housing equity subcommittee that would assist the community development department, and then a proposal for a racial equity officer. And that would be a carryover from the previous plan that Member Lindsay was just elaborating on. So do you have anything else you would want to add onto the list as well?
Didn't last meeting we were talking about some kind of like reading thing?
Yes. So thank you for bringing that up. Last meeting, I had talked about the potential of doing read-alongs that would, again, potentially be conducted within the high school that would focus on D, I, and J issues. So the example was that at Marin College, they had a read-along where they went through the 1619 Project, which is a book that was adapted from Nicole Hannah-Jones's podcast that was titled The 1619 Project. that really detailed the racial inequities in the U.S. and the history of that. And sort of to conclude that read-along, they had Dr. Angela Davis and Dr. Robin Spencer come and speak at the college. And so I thought that it might be something that we could look into and work in conjunction with the school to have something similar put into place that we could implement at the coming beginning of the school year, which I guess is September?
August.
Oh, is it August? Okay, thank you. So that, yeah, that was just for context, since Member Cho, you weren't here last week.
I have a quick question. Could
Yes.
you elaborate on the statement that you guys were working on about social injustice?
I think Member Rios would be best placed to talk about that.
The equity statement is usually a statement that every city builds for itself. It should drive the ideals and ethics that this community strives to uphold and reach. So every city is different. It usually speaks to social justice, language justice, land acknowledgements, and so forth, things that have historically minoritized or othered individuals in the community. But right now, there are no specifics for Albany other than what's on the website, which is pretty, I think, a quote, actually. It's not quite a statement.
I see. Okay, thank you.
There was something that I read that implied that we should look at other policies or statements that the city has and improve them in the area of racial equity too. And I think for that subcommittee, assuming, I mean, again, I'm sort of expecting that this council would approve these things that we're proposing. So assuming they did approve it, that committee might, if they're up for it, take a look at some other things that could be improved in that way too. I'm not a big statement guy myself, but if it's done right, which is not me because I'm not very good at it, but if they're done right, they can have an effect because people are reading them and they're sort of guidance, and and I think they can sometimes be really powerful, but at the end of the day, they are just statements, and we need action, to go along with that. But still, it's number one on the recommendation on the racial equity impact plan. So that's pretty meaningful too, right? If in doubt, I would. The read-along program is really, really tricky. Like I mentioned before, this is a city commission, and there's almost like a firewall between the city and the school district. City staff does not work on any school items, and school staff doesn't work on any city items. The budgets are completely separate. The decision-making bodies, the council does the city, and the school board does the school board. And also, we don't have, as a commission, we don't have a budget. We don't have any staff people that work for us. Those guys work for the city. So we cannot tell staff to do anything because we're not their boss. We can ask them, and they can ask their bosses, or we can ask, we can ask council or, city manager or city clerk or whoever to do something, but we don't have any control over them. And so we don't do programs. So in terms of the read-along program, I was trying to think, how could we pull that off, as this commission, right?
Yeah, so
but I think there is something, which is that it could be that we make a recommendation to council that they do read-alongs as a city and include students as part of the audience. It could be a city program that also reaches out, but I think actually it should reach out to like elderly folk at the senior center, and at the 4th of July celebration, and the read-alongs could happen in lots of places, and so and high school kids and age-appropriate middle school stuff and age-appropriate stuff for the elementary kids, you know? I think it could be really powerful. So I think there is a way, but it's just, we have to know we're only talking about the city council, you know?
Definitely. As it relates to the read-along, I do have a general question. So anybody who has information, please. Is it possible to receive buy-in to a specific idea before maybe solidifying it within a work plan? For example, if member X went and asked the Albany High School librarian, is this something that the school can support? And they said yes. Would it then be useful to first do that before including any further details of that into a work plan?
Yes, but it slows you down, because if we don't ask today, then our next opportunity to ask is in September. Right?
Even if we have a subcommittee that would be drafting maybe solidifying the work plan.
Oh, so we could say that we would ask for this item if under a condition. That's a good point. We could say that the read-along program we would do if if our chair so recommended or something like that. There's nothing that stops you from talking to the school librarian or almost anybody else except for a majority of this body. You can even talk to, as long as you're talking to a minority of this body, you can even do that. You can call me up, or you could call up Eric. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Aaron.
Got it.
There's nothing wrong with that as long as you keep it to less than 4 people on this body because of the Brown Act, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you absolutely can talk to people in the community first. And it's really actually a good thing to do. They just have to know that they can't be calling us up and said, you should, we have to be careful to make our decisions in public. But you can talk to people in private about stuff.
Yeah, so as it relates to the read-along, does anybody have thoughts about having it be something that would be conducted within Albany community versus maybe trying to reach out specifically to somebody at the high school who could help? How are we feeling about that idea?
I think it's a great idea. However, when we start encroaching into the education who is run by Albany Unified School District, then we should have conversations with them in order to implement that. So as long as we have conversations, then there should be no issue. I think it's a good idea. It would also fit under here, racial equity survey. In the survey, you could ask, do you feel represented in Albany Unified School District? In the curriculum, in teachers that reflect identities that are not usually seen. I don't know if that's allowed, but it's certainly worth asking.
Member Trenkel?
Would this also go under the third item? Well, not actual item, but a suggestion on the work plan?
It's so broad that I think it would fit in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any other comments regarding the possible work plan item of a read-along, a community or high school-specific read-along?
I think it's a great idea, and I think it'll also be great if we could gather more people to participate in it, not only students, but as mentioned previously, elderly people as well. So if we can't get direct contact with the school, then I think running it in a citywide level could also be a good alternative.
So as I see, we have 7 proposals.
Oh, wait.
So that is the 4 from staff, right? All of which are fine. I mean, I have no objection to any of them. And then we have 4 that we've brought up, but one of them is duplicated. So the second bullet point by staff talks about the housing element, and we also said a housing equity subcommittee already. So there's sort of a duplicate, right? So that would be, so that's why I say there's 7 of them. There's 4 here, and then the racial equity statement plus the racial equity officer or the racial equity office, maybe it's a even better way to say it, racial equity office, and then the read-along would be a 7-item work plan.
Member Tranquil?
Wouldn't the read-along be under the 3rd item on the list?
What?
Wouldn't the read-along be on the 3rd item on the suggestions?
Consult facilitated forums as part of regular commission meetings. So that is that there would be a forum in this here, like today. That's what this one is. The read-alongs would be like we're doing it in the park and we're doing it at the senior center, you know, and stuff like that, and at the community center. So I didn't see them as the same, but you could possibly do a short read-along. You often end up with long agendas here. We have very short ones because we don't have a work plan yet. But you often end up with really long agendas, and if you're going to eat an hour or something of it doing a read-along during this session, you know, we could be here a long, long time. But maybe there's a way, I don't know. You got to leave the door open. But I didn't see them as the same. I saw them as something different.
Sorry.
Yeah, no apology necessary. I just, you know.
Just to clarify, so with the work plan items on this suggested list, my sense was that we had the SSB tax was the only mandatory item that we will be
Correct.
bringing over into our own work plan. But as it relates to trying to map onto the other items, I didn't think that that's what we were doing currently. I thought that what we were doing is writing out specifically what we would want to be on the work plan, i.e. The outlining and drafting an equity statement for Albany, and then we would include the language we would want to accompany that specific item. So as I see it, we currently have 5 items.
What are the 5?
So provide an annual recommendation to council on programs for services to be provided with sweetened beverage tax revenue. Outlining and drafting an equity statement for Albany. Proposal of to create a housing equity subcommittee. Proposal for the creation of a racial equity officer position, and then possible read along.
Okay, and where the difference is the first and third bullet points. I like the first one because we were the ones that worked our butts off to make the racial equity survey happen. And at one point there was a hiccup and we had to step in and fix things. And it's just not something the city's ever done. No city staff has ever done this before. Our city council has never done it before. So it's really, really new to them. So this would allow us to participate in keeping an eye on it and keeping it on track and making suggestions, for example, that one of the questions be, do you feel included and welcome in Albany schools, right? That sort of thing. It would just allow us to continue to be connected to them, connected to the development of that survey. So I like that first bullet point. The third one I don't care about very much. I don't think it does any harm. I don't think it's terribly meaningful either. So we could have it or not have it. But I would like to have that first bullet point in there so that we can help the city do this racial equity survey correctly. Although if they choose the Justice Collective, I was part of the subcommittee that was evaluating, and we really like the Justice Collective. Like they actually get it, and they know how to do a professional survey, and they come from that. That's the space they come from, is a racial equity space. Mm-hmm. And, but they know how to do surveys too. So like, we loved them. That was our top choice, actually. And that's apparently, last I heard, was the group that the city council is proposing. And so I feel good if they choose them. We'll see what happens. But still,
Okay.
I'd like to add number 1, and I don't care about number 3 one way or the other.
Okay. And I have a question for Mr. Bond, as it relates to the proposal of having a housing equity subcommittee that would assist, I'm assuming, would assist the community development department. In what capacity would you see that that subcommittee working? And, I guess my thought is, if we put this on our work plan, is this something that we would be able to actually participate in within this cycle of items, right? Because it sounds like you're working to get the housing element adopted. Apologies if that's not the right language. And then after that is when we would potentially come in with a housing equity subcommittee. Am I getting that correct?
That's correct, and you got it correct. It is we're adopting the housing element now, and I would appreciate the opportunity to work with the subcommittee as we're beginning the implementation.
And so, do you have a timeline as it relates to when that implementation would begin, and as it relates, and how it would map on to, for example, this specific elected committee, the work that we would be doing within the time that would be members, essentially?
Yes. We're planning to go to the city council to ask them to prioritize this fall. So there's the subcommittee could discuss that with us if they wished, or you could wait for the council to discuss to set those priorities, and then we would, whatever the first choice is, we would start to work at the staff level, and we could meet with the subcommittee to share our research and ideas and pros and cons of different policies and programs that address that goal. Subcommittees are good resources for us to work with you. That'd be fine.
Got it. And just to clarify, sorry, as it relates to being able to participate in that within this, the year within we are talking about having this work plan implemented, that aligns with when the element will be adopted and then implementation begins.
Right. I would hope the element is, well, strictly speaking, the council has already adopted the element. It hasn't been approved by the state. So,
okay.
But I would expect that the prioritization would happen, let's say, in the September to October timeframe, and immediately after that, we would start working on the first item on the list. So, yes, I would hope that at least the first, say, 2 items on their list would happen in the next 12 months.
Got it. And as it relates to how that relationship would be fostered, would it be that we reach out to you and say, hey, we are trying to meet up X amount of, X amount of times within this time frame, or would it be something that the committee exists and then you would call upon us? Like, what does that generally look like?
I think it would probably be most productive if we reached out to you when we have something that's kind of maybe not completely ready, but like half baked, so that your input can go into the completion of it, but we have enough to show you what we have found and what we're thinking.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Do you have regular meetings?
Excuse me?
Do you have regular meetings?
Well, internally, we work every day with like 5 meetings a day. We could.
Do you have regular public meetings?
We come to the Planning and Zoning Commission or this commission, or if the City Council chooses to set up a special task force, we could do that. But for the most part, I would expect it would either be the Planning and Zoning Commission or this commission, depending on what the topic area is.
So would it be helpful if someone, a member of this committee, just sat in the planning and zoning, just to listen in?
Sure. When they have an agenda item that's related to the housing element, yes, I think that would be very helpful.
Are you suggesting that in as opposed to having a housing commission, or are you saying as well as?
No, I was just asking a question of when public meetings are held, and if they're public meetings, then someone from this commission could sit in rather than wait for Mr. Bond to reach out to us. And it just keeps us all in the loop.
Okay,
Yeah, it's not either or, it's more if and when.
got it.
Yeah, the other thing is that a subcommittee could definitely have its own ideas without hearing first, and then subcommittee agrees on what they want to do. I don't think there's anything that precludes, if there's lines of communication open, from passing that information on, to staff, especially if that's what its role is. The question I have for you is, let's say there was a 3-member subcommittee, because mostly they're going to be 3-member subcommittees. They don't have to be, but they're probably mostly going to be that. Is there anything that would prevent or discourage you or somebody you delegate from, like, saying, hey, can you guys come in, Wednesday at 4 and talk to us about this? I can't think of anything, but, would the city manager be cool with that? I don't think the Brown Act precludes that.
No, and with other committees and commissions, every commission is a little different and have different ways of working, but say with our Climate Action Committee, they use a lot of subcommittees, and sometimes we'll just sit in somebody's dining room and talk about whatever we're working on. We might be proactive to you, you might be proactive to us.
Right.
Let's say the city council decides just cause eviction is the first thing that we should work on. A subcommittee might have some ideas and proactively send it to us, or we do some work and then we'll reach out like, hey, we'd like to talk to you about what we're thinking. But it would be very informal. It could be anywhere and anytime.
Great. But just one thing is that what council wants to see is sort of the policy areas we're working on. So we wouldn't say we want to have a housing equity subcommittee on our work plan. What we'd say is we want to work on housing equity. That's one of the policy things that we're working on. And then once that's approved at our September meeting, our next meeting, we would make a motion to form various subcommittees, and that would be one of them. Does that make sense?
That sounds good, yeah.
Yeah.
If I could just elaborate, I think the vision, because housing is such a complex, and really it is above, I think, everybody's head here, respectfully.
Certainly above mine.
Well, it's a complex social issue
Yeah.
that has a lot of landmines. One of the things is that housing, 20% of residents here in Albany already have rent that's too high. And that speaks to a class issue, an income level, maybe even an education level, a language issue, these barriers that are not easy to be addressed by a city staff, just because you're very intimidating. So I think we could do a lot of outreach where we can speak and do the legwork, which is like complete the survey, canvas, knock on doors, such in that nature, so that we can get the information. It's not who is doing the work, but the fact that all the work gets done and it's done collectively. And I don't want to over-encumber Mr. Bond and his very busy 5-meeting-a-day schedule. But I think there is something that we could do in that area. So that's what I was envisioning.
And there's also a role to play for community groups and that sort of thing. And so if there's a community group, that's interested in working on that, we could help them by having them come and, and give a presentation about the work they're doing and they give their phone number, out. And so there's definitely a role for that. And that's where a lot of things happen really, really well, is when you have a community group that's pushing something and working on something, and then you've got a commission, and then you've got staff buy-in, and council buy-in, and boy, if you have that, there's a good chance it's going to work, So, yeah, that's very true. I'd like to suggest that would people be comfortable with a motion? I'll make it if they are, that we do these 6 things. The first, second, and fourth bullet points from staff. And then adding to that the racial equity statement, the racial equity office, and the read-along program as our proposed work plan that we send to council. I'm not making a motion yet. I just want to know how people feel about that.
I think one thing I do want to get a better sense of, especially as it relates to language and in you clarifying what you were trying to get at with the housing subcommittee, is this something that we work out as a group to, like, the specific language that we would want to use for the different items? Does the individual who brought it up draft the language for the item? How are we going about doing that? Or how would we like to go about doing that?
I think ideally we work on it together. Like, that's the point of the commission, that we work together. Also, it's a lot of work to write it up, having written a few myself. So it would be best if we all work together.
Are you talking about our proposed work plan, or are you talking about, like, when we are proposing a racial equity statement to council? Because I believe this will get done by this group. So it's going to happen if we put it on the work plan. Are you talking about the content of what we send to council, or are you, for a particular item like racial equity statement, or are you talking about the wording for the work plan?
I'm talking about the wording for the work plan and what actually gets approved by the group.
Oh, I see. Well, the wording for these 3, they're fine like they're written, right? The wording for the other 3, we could work on some of it tonight if we want, because we have until something like 9 or 9. What are we scheduled to do?
9 o'clock.
Yeah, till 9, so we only
Okay.
have 15
So
minutes.
we'd have about 15 minutes, well, less than that, because there's about 5 minutes of miscellaneous stuff to do. But what we would do is we would authorize maybe chair and vice chair, or just to make it really work fast, just the chair to work with staff to finalize the language that we're going to send to council.
Okay.
We don't want to wait until September, or we can't start doing anything until October.
Right.
Right? And we're running out of time. So we either have to extend the meeting and get all of our wording together, or authorize somebody to have that power.
How are members feeling about that? Would you want to stay longer or authorize somebody else?
I would like to authorize somebody else.
Okay.
He's got kids.
Too. I'm also tired.
So there's kind of a draft with notes up here, kind of following along with what you guys have been talking about.
Cool.
If you can see from that angle.
It's just that the bottom 3, I know that could you just make them darker and maybe a little bigger?
I could read them off.
Okay.
So the first one is unchanged. Participate in forthcoming citywide racial equity survey process and provide recommendations to the City Council regarding insight identified in the final report for the racial equity survey. Second item is mostly unchanged, but with an addition, provide recommendations in coordination with other advisory bodies towards implementation of the city's housing element, with particular focus on programs to help facilitate increased housing availability for all members of the community, to work with the Community Development Department on housing equity issues. The third item is struck through. That was the facilitating forums item. The fourth is unchanged. That's the SSB. Provide an annual recommendation to the council on programs or services to be provided with the sugar-sweetened beverage tax revenue. The new additions are make a recommendation for the creation of an equity statement, comma, draft outline and statement. Next item is explore the creation of a racial equity office, parentheses, racial equity officer. And final addition is research the possibility to implement a read-along program for community members of all ages to participate.
Thank you.
And we, Akani, or Chair Ajwang and I you can designate for us to flesh these out if you like, or as is, or, you know.
Would you be okay with that? Because that gives us flexibility, you know, to like improve the wording. You could talk with us before you meet with them and say, you know, what else do you want in here? There's nothing that precludes you from doing that, particularly if it's somebody's item. Again, if you keep it to, on any given item, no more than 3 people can, you know, you could talk to only 2 more people, right? Because of the Brown Act, right? But other than that, you know, I thought, would you be comfortable with that?
Yeah, well, I still want to check in with Member Cho and Member Trenkle in terms of their opinions on having it now, pushing it, and having me and staff work with it.
I personally don't really have a preference. Either works. So I guess whatever is comfortable for the majority.
I think that's a good plan. I'm pretty sure, I think the wording is pretty good, but I think if you would like to change it a bit. Also, do we approve the items now and then you work on the wording later, or?
That would be the, yeah. I mean, the wording is pretty good. I just think people are going to think of some improvements. The council might want it fleshed out a little bit. As you notice with the first 3, they're more fleshed out than the last 3. They just generally like it fleshed out a little more rather than being super vague. So I think that's the thing where people could send you suggestions, but then the 2 of you could flesh it out a little more. And I trust your judgment, and it lets us move forward. It saves us basically a month. You know, we can get started a month earlier by doing that.
Sounds good. So do we need to have a motion for that?
Yeah.
You do, but I should mention there is one public commenter.
Oh, yep. Let's take the public comment.
Jeremiah? Jeremiah, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay. So the work plan can always be amended, right? So you could always add things in the future if you need to. It's not really the final end all of the rest of your year for this commission, right? I mean, it took us 6 months to, last commission, SCJC, it took us 6 months to come up with a work plan. And here it's kind of one meeting here, staff suggests something, and okay, it's all done in one meeting. Wow, that sure happened quick. I was just wondering if any of the work plan items that staff had presented tonight, was any of commissioners aware of this before the meeting, so you can kind of do some research before the meeting? Or were all these work plan items just kind of sprung up on during this meeting, and you kind of got to think on your toes and kind of just act quickly on this. Just a little confused on the preparation of the work plan items. But yeah, anyway, it could always be amended. If you want to have ideas in the future, if something comes up, you know, you could always add a work plan item, but I guess it has to be approved by city council. I'm not sure if, I mean, these are the only things you could talk about for the rest of the year. I'm sure things will come up, and you still got to have room on the agenda to, you know, talk about, you know, real life situations that happen, you know, that things that come up. And I was just wondering if I had mentioned about the land acknowledgement statement. I was wondering if anything on the work plan is going to be regarding the commitment that the city is saying they're upholding with the land acknowledgement statement. I think it would be a good thing to add to the work plan would to be something to do with the Ohlone tribe, something to do with, you know, revising something or continuing the commitment to the Ohlones, you know, possibly putting up a plaque, putting up the land acknowledgement statement somewhere in Albany, City Hall, lobby, council chambers, something like that. I just don't see any room on this work plan yet for, you know, things like with the Ohlone tribe and the ongoing commitment that we swear we're supposed to uphold during the land acknowledgement statement. So if that could be something regarding Ohlone tribe on the work plan, please.
I have a clarification response, which is the thing is, what can you do about when somebody has a new idea? So let's say somebody had an idea to, we ought to do this, you know, in the city, something like that. The law is, the Brown Act says that if you're going to discuss something, it's got to be on the agenda. Somebody can't just throw it out and then you have a discussion, because it's not fair to the community. They didn't know that you were going to have this discussion. And so it has to be on the agenda, and then it's only allowed to be on the agenda if it's a council-approved work item. So you can't have in-depth discussions about things that are not on your work plan. That's just not, you can't. What people do is there's a couple of times on the agenda where they have opportunities to bring up new things. One is under announcements. And another is there's always going to be a point on the agenda where it says future agenda items. So you can request something be put on the agenda of the next meeting or some future meeting at that point in the agenda. And then there could at least be a brief discussion about, do we ask the council to put it on our work plan? But you couldn't like spend half an hour discussing it in depth. The only discussion would be, do we put it on the work plan? Right, so that's just kind of the way things work. And then for setting of the agenda is usually done with the city staff person and with the chair working on it together, is how the agenda is made. So hopefully that answered at least the Brown Act question.
And also just to answer Jeremiah's question, we've had the work plan for a little over a month, so we've had a chance to look through it.
So can I make a motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So can you put the 6 items back up?
Sure.
So I move that that the RISE Commission is going to request these 6 items that are in front of us. Specifically, the first, second, and fourth items that are 2023 work plan items, and then the racial equity statement, the racial equity office, and the read-along program be our initial work plan, and that that our chair and will work with city staff to finalize language. That language will be sent to City Council on our behalf, within a month. No, they're not going to meet in August either, right? Maybe within a couple of weeks so that they can get to it.
They do have another meeting this month, yeah, the 17th.
So can you guys get it done by the 17th and get it to council?
I believe it's a full agenda.
So then they would take it up, sorry, this is not part of the motion, but, so then they don't meet in August at all, right? But they
No.
could take it up at their first September meeting, which would be before we meet. Okay. So there you go. So you guys can work out the timing, but we would want to see if we can get it on the council's first September agenda, so that we can start working on stuff when we meet on the first Tuesday.
Yeah. In the interest of time, do you mind outlining the motion?
Doing what?
Do you mind outlining the motion in the interest of time? You had begun with a motion.
Oh, okay, yeah. So those 6 items are what we want to work on, with the final wording to be authorized by our chair and staff working together to flush it out and get it in shape and get it to council as soon as viable.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
People have a chance for discussion.
And then now I say what?
I'll take the roll call vote now.
Okay, great.
Member Cho?
Here.
Oh, no, it's the vote.
Sorry.
No worries.
I mean, yeah. Yes.
Member Lindsay?
Yes?
Member Rios? Yes. Member Trenkle?
Yes.
And Chair Ajwang?
Yes.
Very good. Motion passes.
All right.
Thank you. And so now moving on to future agenda items. Are there any requests for future agenda items?
I mean, presumably we'll be organizing ourselves, hopefully, and how we're going to work on our work plan next time. But that's kind of obvious. So.
Okay.
I would like to just put on the agenda that should our work plan be adopted, then I would like to discuss subcommittees.
Lovely. Thank you. Are there any other requests for future agenda items? Okay, I'll take that as no.
I'm sorry. For the student members, if you think of something in the city that you think is a problem that needs to be solved, you can bring that up as another, specifically you're kind of representing young folk. But this could be about any problem of any sort. And then you can say, I would like this to be on a future agenda at this point in the meeting, right? So.
Chair, we do have one public comment for future agenda items.
Yes, lovely to take the public comment.
Jeremiah? Jeremiah, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Gosh, that's so weird. Can you hear me now?
Hey, we can hear you now.
Okay. I just got to get it formal on here that regarding the Ohloni's and the land acknowledgement statement and the ongoing commitment that is relayed or portrayed in the land acknowledgement statement, that it says that, there's a commitment to ongoing efforts to keep things, working and an ongoing conversation. So it would be nice to where, there could be an open discussion for this commission to talk about, what we want to do to honor the Ohlone. What are some things we could do, a festival or some activity regarding it or something. Thank you.
I mean, actually, I think it's not a bad idea for maybe to ask the Lijon leadership to come and give us a presentation about what they would like to see. That might be a rather cool presentation. So I'll make that request under future agenda items, that we have the the Lijon tribe come and give us a presentation. We can have a discussion.
Thank you, Member Lindsay, and thank you, Jeremiah. Are there any further comments about the future agenda items? Okay. So moving on to the next meeting. The next meeting is going to be on Thursday, September 7th, 2023, 7 p.m. Any comment about the next meeting?
I just did want to emphasize that it is in September. There's the August break, and it is going to be on a Thursday, which is untypical for this group.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. If there's no further comment, then this meeting is adjourned.